So I want to welcome everyone for joining us for our legal careers panel tonight. We have three Albany, Rockefeller College alumni who are currently working in the legal field, who have joined us tonight to share some of their experiences. I will in a minute introduce them and I'll pin them so that they'll be bigger on the screen. But we do want this to be interactive, and we want to get questions from all of the students. So again, this is part of our political science public policy internship class, but it is also an open session for any students at UAlbany who are curious to learn more about legal careers. So we welcome those who are new and not normally with us. Thank you for joining us for the panel portion tonight. So let me go ahead. I'm going to spotlight our speakers so that you guys will be able to see them a little bit better. There we go. What we'll do is we'll start, I think I'll start by having each of you just kind of introduce yourselves and give us a little bit of, kind of your background in terms of your career trajectory, maybe when you went to UAlbany, where you went to law school, and what you've kind of done since in kind of a quick synopsis, and then we'll dive into some questions. And then as far as students go, if you've got questions, if you're in the room physically with me in person, raise your hand and I'll call on you. If you're on Zoom, you can use the raise your hand feature and we'll call on you to ask questions. Or if you're on Zoom, you can also type into the chat. And if you're not able to, unmute yourself, you can type your questions into the chat and we can read your questions that way as well. So for those who don't know me, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Joan Marceau. I'm the undergraduate internship and career coordinator here at Rockefeller College. Working with students on internships and career opportunities. And many of our students are interested in field in careers in the law eventually after undergrad. So I've talked to a lot of students who have that as part of their career goals. So I want to thank Nick and Will and Alex for being with us tonight. And I think we'll just go across the screen the way I see you. So Nick, if you want to go first and introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Rangel. I am the second deputy counsel for the New York State Senate Majority Counsel and Program Office. I supervise about half of the committees in the Senate. And I went to Albany Law School for a JD MPA with Rockefeller. And I also did my undergraduate bachelor's degree at UAlbany.
Excellent.
And
Will.
I'll pass it to Will.
Hey everybody, Will Mack here. I graduated from University at Albany in 2000. Go Danes. I then went to Columbia Law School. Graduated from there in 2003. Started my career at a law firm called Skadden Arps. I then clerked, which is when you work for a judge, for a year in the Southern District of New York, which is a federal courthouse in downtown Manhattan. After that, I was a litigator for a little while, went off to the Obama campaign, had a good result there in 2008, joined the Obama White House. I was there for 3 years in counsel's office. Then I came back to New York and became a securities regulator at FINRA, which is like the SEC, but private. After that, I joined the law firm I'm at now called Greenberg, Traurig, and I've been at Greenberg for 9 years. And at Greenberg, I chair the firm's financial regulatory and compliance practice. Greenberg Traurig is one of these big corporate law firms. We have 2,400 attorneys and 40 offices in 20 countries or something like that.
Excellent. Thanks, Will. Alex, go ahead.
Thanks, Joan. Good evening, everybody. My name is Alex Pena, serving currently as special counsel out of the U.S. Department of Transportation. I came in on January 20th of 2021 as an appointee with the Biden administration. That's where I've been since. I am a 2010 University of Albany grad, where I majored in political science and English. Then I took some time between undergrad and law school, spent about 5 years where I was in and out of campaigns and service in the New York State Senate in New York. And so that's where I was. And then when I went to law school at Boston College. And following law school, worked at a law firm, Morgan Lewis Bacchius, where I did financial transactions, and banking transactions as a finance associate there before coming on board with the Biden administration.
Excellent. Thank you. So to get us started, you all have very different positions right now, are doing very different things with the law. So maybe if you could tell us a little bit about kind of what your day-to-day job looks like in your current role within the bigger field of the legal field. And I don't care what order you go in, you guys can jump in however you want.
I'll go just so we just go around in the circle again. So in my day-to-day for 6 months out of the year, I'm negotiating legislation, negotiating the budget. I cover a wide range of topics: public protection, judiciary, human services, housing, government operations, and budget and revenue. So if I'm not studying new issues, I'm meeting with stakeholders, I'm learning kind of the nuances with legislative asks and budget requests. And, going to meetings, doing presentations, kind of all of that. And then in the off session, we're doing more research, stakeholder research, meeting with people to learn more about new campaigns across the state. For example, Housing Justice for All has these campaigns that they're working on for like legislative changes to eviction protections. And then I also have the distinct privilege of practicing a lot of election law in election years. I work, I'm on my party's committees at the county and local level, but also at the state level for the Senate. And I get to handle like recounts and absentee ballots and mail-in ballots and sort of all the election district or BOE work that goes into making sure election outcomes are correct and accurate, and that the integrity of the election outcomes is protected as from the legal perspective. So in that sense, we have midterm elections that I'll be involved with across the state as in an election practice capacity. Will?
Okay. So I like to say that I'm a securities regulatory nerd. My wife and kids say just the nerd part is true. Most big firms, lawyers can be grouped into one of two categories: litigation or corporate. I fall into neither of those, and sometimes both. I'm a regulatory attorney, which means I'm specialized to an industry. My industry is the finance industry. I help my clients, largely broker-dealers, by create broker-dealers, to take on new business lines. I help them when they get in trouble with the authorities, that's FINRA and the SEC. I help them with transactional stuff. I'll support a merger or acquisition of an existing group that has a broker-dealer. And if you're still awake, I'm excited. Arguably what I do is necessary. It's nowhere near as important as what Alex and Nick do, but I do enjoy it.
Thanks. Well, I'll take that cue. A day in the life as a transportation lawyer here at the Department of Transportation's Office of General Counsel is pretty dynamic. It's been pretty great the last couple of years. As I mentioned earlier on, was more so, at least in the kind of general space that Will was at in kind of finance. So coming into this role, just brought my just general legal skills with it, but did not have a background in transportation outside of some ancillary issues that came up in my time in state government. The Department of Transportation, 7,000 employees, has about 100 lawyers. So I sit in the general counsel's office, which is the head lawyer for the department and top advisor to the secretary. So on a daily basis, it could be a number of issues that impact the secretary and his senior advisors, and just kind of the more front-paced does a lot of things that people don't see, which is just kind of run the different modes of regulate rather the different modes of transportation in this country. And that goes about 9 different agencies that sit underneath the U.S. Department of Transportation, which is the parent department. and there's 9 agencies: transit, to aviation, highways, ports, pipelines, motor carriers, car safety, and then a great Lake St. Lawrence Seaway, which is partnership between the U.S. and Canada with respect to water that borders both, a body of water that borders both. Chief counsel offices, they have legal offices that help support the day-to-day operations of that department as they regulate that particular mode of transportation. But sometimes questions come up that rise beyond the day-to-day, and they seek guidance from the Office of General Counsel. And so that's where I would step in and support the General Counsel and lawyers in our office to kind of troubleshoot. And so, some days it's focused on, airports and delays and cancellations, and other days it's about, other days it's about railroad transportation. Other days it's about whether or not we should, how much money we can be able to deliver to build a new highway project. A lot of things in between, and which I can explain a little about the different the different priorities of the administration. But that's pretty. They go to the U.S. Department of Transportation, and there's an interest in the secretary getting involved, and we support to make sure we troubleshoot some answering those tough legal questions.
Excellent. So does anyone have questions? Let's see if you guys have any. I have more questions, but I want to answer your questions if you have. There's one in the room. Go ahead.
If you want to get into like a really niche field of law, like say international.
Actually, come up here and ask it. Come stand right there, and then they can see who you are. Tell us your name and go ahead and introduce yourself and ask.
Hi, my name is Rangel. I'm a freshman. I'm not in this class.
That's okay.
If you wanted to get into like a very niche field of law, like international law, would you recommend getting experience first before going to law school? So that way, like you have background, like experience, and that gives you an edge to get like a job in that field? Or would going to law school after undergrad be okay?
I have some thoughts. So I initially wanted to do international law. So I do have a concentration in international law. And here's what I learned from that is I should have gone to an international law school, not Albany Law School, because my opportunities for international law internships from Albany as a base were much harder to identify and to be competitive for. There are a lot of law schools that have more robust and intentional international law programs. In fact, Albany Law's concentration in international law was only achievable because I had an extra year as part of my grad school program so that I could like meet all of the criteria for that concentration. So what I would say is go to a school that has a strong international law program and has a strong international law internship program so that you can get experience with agencies and nonprofits and organizations that are doing the kind of work that you're interested in. Even if you're interested in, domestic international law for like the State Department, those kinds of internships are just a little bit harder to find if you want to stay in the city of Albany, I think. If anyone else has other perspectives on that, please feel free to jump in and override that. I will say I did have some luck with remote research for the UN while I was in law school. So I did get to do some international sort of remote like pro bono and research project work, but I quickly pivoted to state and local practice because I wanted to stay here. I could have moved, but I stayed here.
I've always found that people with a couple of years of work experience make really, really good lawyers coming out of law school because they tend to know something about they may know something about the industry in which they end up being a lawyer in. They also tend to bring better work habits to law school because, they're used to having a job. And if you treat law school like a job, you'll be successful in it. So I would say, yeah, go get some work experience. Spend a couple of years doing that, but don't lose sight of your goal.
Yeah, I would agree with Will that there's no detriment to taking time off to explore your career options. I took 4 years off before I went to law school, and I was a better student. I knew what I wanted to do much better. And Alex also had some career experience before he went to law school.
Excellent. All right, other questions? In the back, come on up.
Hi, my name is Ryan. I'm a political science major. I'm a junior right now. I have a quick question about typically the business law path, because that might be a path that I'm interested in going down. Would you recommend possibly going to, getting your MBA first, like with that business experience, then possibly going to law school after? Or in like your field, do you typically see that happen? Or would you recommend maybe going and studying law, then possibly pursuing an MBA at a later date?
I mean, why not do them together? If you want, if you know you want. Sorry?
I said that's fair. That's a fair enough point. Typically, I did some research, like a path like that would be a little bit harder to get into just because it's a little bit more competitive, but just throwing out ideas.
Well, here's what you do. You go to the very best law school you can, and
Yeah.
if you're at a good university, they'll have a good business school. And once you're there, you apply to the business school. You're going to throw another year on regardless to get these 2 degrees. That way you're already in the path. And I went to school with people who did that.
Yeah, same here. There's if you go by what's available, like what's promoted, like the traditional programs and which schools, like you're going to limit the amount of schools that you can go to that will have that upfront JD MBA program.
Right.
But I was advised at the same point of, well, I thought about it for a little bit, either doing a public policy or an MBA. I ultimately decided not to do either, and I ended up going into corporate law. So there's a pathway there as well. But one of the biggest recommendations I got was to apply, get into the best law school you can, and then just reach out to either the business school or the public policy school and say, hey, I'd like to do a joint degree. And typically they'll make it work and make it happen when you're there.
Yeah.
So I would just also note that you typically can register for the joint program, the master's program, after you've started law school, even a year after you've started law school, because the dual degree program, your first year is only law classes anyway. Typically, you don't have to take any additional exams to get into your grad school. They just accept you on the basis that you're already in law school. So you're not like, you're not taking more exams or anything. So you're just applying to get into the business school. But if you're already in the law school, there's usually like an automatic acceptance rate. And then it just blends in your graduate work with your law work for the next 2 years. And it adds 1 year to your law degree. Essentially, it's a 4-year instead of 3, and you get 2 degrees out of it.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much.
Other questions? If anyone on Zoom has questions, feel free. Abby, go ahead.
Hi, I am also interested in applying to Albany Law and then also Boston College. So I was just kind of wondering, you guys don't have to answer, but just for like the LSAT, like any tips or tricks, and then also like, what was your score if you're comfortable sharing, just for my own. Thank you.
Gosh. I mean, the only tips I would give is the U Albany Alumni Association has very, very cheap LSAT courses available to U Albany students. So I didn't take a class, but if you're so inclined, they're very helpful, I think.
Yeah, take a class. Take the class.
Yeah, why not? It's like, and it's cheap through the Alumni Association, I think.
Yeah, I think I'd say take a class. I studied for the LSAT without a class. I was working, and I just did it every night for 2.5 months. You could do it either way, but in retrospect, I wish I would have had the class a little bit more foundation. I was fortunate, got lucky, but I think that you take a class and then obviously do the studying on the side. And I think in terms of tips, it's just, similar to how you make law, I will say you make law school. If you treat it like a job, you're going to be successful. If you treat that preparing for that exam like a job and you take it seriously and you kind of follow the prompts and guides and, and how to, score the best in each type of the component of the exam, you'll get a score that'll put you in a competitive place. And so that's just the same advice we'd have for law school generally, but it's just one exam. And so really is take it seriously. But that's probably the best advice we give besides taking a class that can, get you prepared.
Yeah, real talk. Absolutely take the class. I don't know what companies offer these things now. When I was in school, it was like Princeton Review, I think. Or Kaplan, that was it. Anyway, it doesn't matter what they call it. There's a program here and you guys can get on it. And, everybody, kids at the Ivies right now are already in these classes. I learned that when I went to Columbia and met these kids who've been preparing for law school since they were freshmen. There is a way to do this, and it involves following certain prompts, and you will get what everyone else gets. They're not smarter than you. They're not. No, they just know some things you don't, because their parents did this before them, and the knowledge is out there. It's not hidden. Do not contemplate. You can go at this yourself, but there's no reason to. A class will give you structure and foundation and teach you all the tips and tricks you will need to know to get a higher score.
Excellent. And Taylor put a link to that information in the chat for everyone. And she'll put it on Blackboard for everybody who's in the room tomorrow. And we'll send it in the follow-up email to those of you who are just here for the panel tonight. Kai, go ahead.
Hey, so I just took my LSAT. I also am in the filing process for my LLC, and I was also planning on attending law school. And I know you guys touched like briefly on like taking a gap year, things of that nature. But I want to know, a lot of my mentors tell me that it's difficult to work full time while being in law school. So I want to know what you guys suggest if I'm trying to start my own organization and go to law school at the same time.
I worked and it was hard and my grades struggled, but I was also on my own and putting myself through school. So, I mean, I think there's like two approaches. I think if you can afford it, you should try not to work your first year, and you should make sure that when you do work, it's on a path towards your internships and degrees or whatever, that they're all aligned, because nothing, kills your dreams like student debt. So, you have to find the balance. But it is really difficult to work. And I worked full time, and it was like struggle city. So if I would recommend it, be focused on law school in as much as humanly possible. I mean, it is a full-time job. It is a lot of work. So adding on top of that is, if you don't have to, is going to just make your path just harder, I think. I don't know if you guys have other thoughts.
Yeah, there's two points. One is sometimes law schools, although I think they've eased up on that over the years, but sometimes certain law schools don't permit you to work in your first year. But just keep that in mind. But I think they've kind of loose on that more recent years. The other is, if you do work, try to avoid it. But if you do work, obviously, make sure it's not, that there's a healthy balance. I didn't work per se in law school, but I did a bunch of extracurriculars. And those extracurriculars, particularly in my second year, took up a lot of time. They essentially served as another job. And, you struggle a lot. You lose sleep. It's very stressful. My grades suffered, not terribly, but more so than they would have on an average semester. And then, had to work extra hard the next semester to even it out. And, those types of calls that you have to make. And, it's law school stressful enough. So just keep that in mind that I think it's going to be an uphill battle, but it's certainly, there are folks out with law school who actually did work in their second and third years, but they had a healthy balance, and they basically reworked their schedules to make sure that it fit, right? So if you're gonna think about doing it, make sure you're just intentional about it, And you have that flexibility typically in your second and third year and not your first year. So just keep that in mind as well. So your second and third year might be more areas where you could actually create a conducive schedule in which you could work and run a business or try to build a business, because you can front load your schedule. But your first year, you're going to have something set. So just, if you get into a particular school, take a look at how their classes work and things like that for their first year, because that might be helpful as well.
Nothing to add to that. Well put by both panels.
Excellent. Oswaldo, go ahead.
Guys, I just have a question for the whole panel. You folks are all in kind of lucrative positions, and I was just wondering where, I should ask actually. So which connection do you think got you guys to where you guys are today? Was it, undergrad, law school, or maybe like in the workforce somewhere that you guys, that something helped you to get to where you are today?
I mean, I had mentors at Albany and a strong professional network through like my reputation in the community and among like colleagues and counterparts, my peers, right? Like I do a lot of volunteer work. I'm on these things. Will and I are going to be best friends by the time we're on another panel. Alex and I worked together back in the minority conference days. So, I think a lot of my parents didn't go to college till I graduated college. I don't come from like a family that did that. I didn't know what law school was when I went to law school, or like what the bar exam was. So I didn't like start with a foundation or a network, but I built that network just being here and being involved in the community and working up through, I guess, my passions. I didn't know anybody at the Senate when I got that job, so I think it was really just a strong like connection with my community. And obviously my professional, background, but everything like builds on each other, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. Listen, I try to affiliate myself with the best institutions I could early on in my career, and built a network out of that, which is still paying off. The first law firm I worked at is a very large law firm, and folks who work there with me are now in all sorts of different places, and occasionally they become clients. By which I'm saying, so some hard work on my part and a lot of good luck.
Yeah, definitely echo those comments. Mine, I would say my background is largely through my, service in the public sector following college. So I got involved in a campaign right after I graduated in 2010. Actually, I got involved a little bit earlier than that, but for all intents and purposes, I got involved in the campaign when I graduated, and that involvement in the New York State campaign put me into that world. And then I was in and out of that world to this day. And those are the folks who wrote my recommendations when I went to law school, wrote my recommendations for all my my summer externships that I did at law firms, things like that. Then when I went to the law firm, then when I came onto the administration, when I did background checks, they reached out to folks who I had met throughout the years. And so it kind of sometimes, sometimes you should, if you kind of basically put yourself in, you kind of build a community, like Nick said, to Will's point, put yourself in, surround yourself and contribute towards like sound institutions, whether private or public. And those are going to carry with you. And so that's kind of where my start happened, where just getting involved in a campaign, and then those folks became professional contacts in government, and then became persons who were making recommendations down the line.
I want to circle back on like the way you started that question though, Oswaldo, because I think it's important like, I want to just point out that when I first graduated law school, my first job was for $40,000. And like a lot of people come out of law school and grad school thinking that like everybody starts in lucrative fields, and that is just not true. And a lot of people start at the bottom of the bottom and like really have to fight to work up. So I think it's an important perspective to just keep in mind, especially when you're thinking like, how long am I going to be outside of the workforce to be in law school? And how much student debt am I going to take on for that? And just sort of putting in perspective that coming out of law school doesn't mean you jump into a lucrative career. It can, for a lot of people, start pretty modest before it takes off. But being a lawyer has a much higher like capacity for wage growth or salary, right? So your trajectory is steeper than a lot of other professions. So even though you start lower, there's more opportunity for growth as an attorney than some other professions. So just level setting. I have a lot of people who come in and, you know, think like they're going to make a lot of money in state government. And I'm like, it's government, man. Unlikely. At
Excellent.
least for a while, you know. Anyway.
I think we lost Alex, but I'm sure he'll. He was having a little, we were having a little trouble hearing him at some point, so maybe he lost some connectivity. But are there other questions in the room here? Yes, come on up.
Alex made it back on. Joan just.
I'll get him pinned. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry about that.
Back to my question about like international law, right? You said it would be good to go to a school that has a really strong international law program. Like, what school do you know? Do you like know off the top of your head if you know?
I mean, I bet Columbia has a great international offer. I don't know. NYU, if I was going to guess, I'd say the big name law schools in real cities. I think Albany is just too far away from international agencies. Denver, Colorado has a great international program. A lot of schools in California. I mean, I would say big cities and coastal cities.
I think that raises a good question for the panel, which is what is the value of a concentration? I have an answer, but I don't want to go first.
I don't think there's a lot of value or need for concentration. In fact, I think for me, going to law school was like opened a universe of fields that I just had no idea existed and could never have even imagined before I went to law school. So I don't think anyone really needs concentration, but
Yeah, I think it's a great flag by Will that I don't think that concentrations are particularly needed either. I also think that you can do a couple of things at once. You know, you don't need to limit the type of school you go to because they have one particular international law program. You could go to a school that has a good study abroad program that gives you an opportunity at some point your second or third year to study in London, Paris, or Italy, right, or South, right, or you know, South America, and then get that kind of exposure to, you know, learning law in another country, having contacts there, and that in itself will take you far. But then you can also take the classes that you want to take while you're there, you know, and maybe they just have other types of robust programs. So I really think that you should make the most out of law school, because at the end of the day, you know, at some point you're going to get into a practice area and it's going to get narrower and narrower. But that's the one point in time in your life when it comes to the law where you're going to learn the most on a daily basis. You're just going to learn about everything, get exposed to everything. So that's really what should be the focus. Even if you know exactly what you want to do, you can go to school and say, oh, they have a really great study abroad program, or they have a particular professor who has an international law background. I'll make sure I'll take a class with that professor. But otherwise, you should go to the best school that you can, or the school that has the most robust type of experiences, whether it be classroom experiences or external programs, or great professors, or a combination of all three that kind of gives you a well-rounded experience. Because as when you go out in the world, like, especially in the legal world, like they're looking for, good practices, good routines, understanding kind of a well-rounded individual that's going to be thrown into either a team that's working on an issue on the public side or an issue on the private side, and it's going to you're going to pull from those experiences, and that'll make you a good lawyer. So I wouldn't narrow yourself too much. Law school is a good time for you to expand your horizons. But to the international law point, I'd say there's other ways to get around that too, including programs in which you could study abroad.
You have an answer for that, Will, also?
It's been answered, asked and answered.
And I would just add, and you can correct me, but I would say that particularly since you're still a first year student, if you still got time as an undergrad, there's a lot of time in undergrad to be doing internships and getting study abroad experiences and getting those experiences in undergrad as well, that can help you, one, decide if this is really something you are interested in, make some connections in those kind of particular interest areas, and get you some experiences before you even are making decisions about law school.
I have a follow-up on the international law thing that I'm really sort of hung up on here. I think it would be helpful if you explored what about international issues you're most interested in, because let's say, like, I'm really into housing issues, so I'm just going to use that as an example. Let's say like your thing is homelessness, or let's say it's affordable housing. You could develop an expertise at any like local level, and then at some point in your career, even transition that into an international nonprofit or development organization. So I think saying like, I want to do international law is like saying I want to do domestic law. There's so many, like every single thing that there is a issue area identifiable for, you can do it at the local level and you can do it at the international level. So maybe exploring a little bit more about what you really mean by international law, and then maybe thinking about the kind of work environment you're interested in. Are you talking about government and interstate or international across like governments? Like, do you just want to work for the feds? Do you want to work in foreign service? Do you want to work in the State Department? Like, what do you want to do there? Or are you thinking like nonprofit work? Or maybe even agency work. So I think there's a lot to explore under the umbrella of international law. And once you get a better sense of kind of what you mean by that and what you're really looking for, it'll be easier to find those opportunities wherever it is you land.
Great. Abby, go ahead.
Hi, I just had a question about like the bar exam. Do you guys think that there's an advantage, or like it's better to go to law school in the same state you're planning to take the bar?
I think there's,
To some degree, right? Like if you go to law school in Louisiana, it'll be harder to come to New York and study for the bar in New York and pass the New York State bar, because they have some distinctions in their legal processes and theories and philosophies. But I think what's more important is that when you take the bar exam, you have like a easy, accessible, and like comfortable place to stay.
People have been going to law school all around the country and then taking the New York bar for hundreds of years. That is a very established course. You should go to the very best law school you get into that meets your needs, that you think is right for you, regardless of where it is. You're going to study for a bar. Hey, maybe you decide not to come back to New York. Who knows, right? And studying for the bar, and the law school doesn't really prepare you for the bar anyway. That's sort of a fallacy. So it doesn't matter where you go to law school.
I think it probably matters like which bar course you take. Like if you're going to take the New York State bar, take a New York State bar course. I didn't take a bar course either. I'm the worst, but you should take a bar course. They have a much higher success rate. But let's take Barbary. They have a bar course. They have a course for every state. Take the one for the state where for the bar you want to take. And a lot of them are on video and remote, so you can take New York's bar degree course in California for the most part.
Went remote decades ago. They were way ahead of the, ahead
Yeah.
of the trend.
Excellent. Other questions in the room or on Zoom?
I think one thing you think about where you go to law school is that usually where you go to law school is also where you do your internships, which means that's where you're building your professional network. So I agree with Will 100%. You should go to the best school you can go to. But you also want to kind of think through where you're building your networks and where you're spending like your summers, for example.
Yeah, the summers are a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, Nick, you'd agree that you don't need to spend your summers in the same place you go to law school. right?
Correct. Exactly.
Other questions? So what, this is one of my favorite questions, always to ask, and the students never ask it, so I'm going to ask it. What would be your best recommendation to someone who is currently an undergrad? And we've got everything from freshmen to seniors here, but what would be your best recommendation to them of things they should be doing now in anticipation of law school and a career in the legal field?
Will, you go first?
I have an action item for you. You should do the New York State Assembly or Senate internship. If you still have the opportunity to do so. I think everyone on this panel did it, and it was very rewarding for me. No, you didn't do it, Nick? Oh, okay. All right.
No, I didn't know. I'm really
Really
bad at these things.
You only know.
But for a reason, it was my very first time working shoulder to shoulder with a lawyer. I did not know a lawyer growing up. No one in my family had gone to graduate school. And so I knew I wanted to be this thing, a lawyer, but I had no idea what they did. And during the internship, I mean, we had one in my assembly office, and I could just talk to him, and that was really exciting for me. It's also good work experience. So I would absolutely say that is a thing you can do to, and I think it looks good on applications. So that is a thing you can do to move yourself toward a career in the law if you're so interested.
Yeah, I will. Will's experience with I did the New York State Assembly program in my junior year in Albany, but the exact same background. No lawyers in the family, nobody had a graduate degree. First time I worked with a lawyer or was exposed to one in the professional sense, so on and so forth. So that was the benefit from doing that. It also has kind of multiple paths that you it's interesting because Albany, the capital of New York, is not in New York City, right? So you have access to folks who are making big decisions and kind of are going to be exposed to a bunch of different issues that are important to people in New York State, and you're going to not do it in as competitive or as a densely populated environment as New York City. You all go to school in Albany. You have access to these legislators and lawyers and counsel and policy people and advocates, lobbyists, and all these people who are in this area at least 6 months a year during the time that during the spring semester. So take advantage of that. Even if you can't, if you missed the deadline for the internship, figure out a way to get time in the office where you can just actually do an informal internship, but still get some sort of credit or recognition. That exposure goes a long way. You make professional contacts. And when you graduate, those are the types of folks who you could be able to say, oh, is there opportunities to work or I actually have like a staff job, and you can do that while you still figure out what you want to do or do that before you go to law school. And it contributes to its overall goal, because whether it's policy or whatever you're working on, it is the law at the end of the day, and you're working with lawmakers. So that is going to look good from a law school standpoint. I mean, even if you don't want to be in the public policy space, if for some folks earlier on who spoke about, well, maybe I want to go into the corporate side or the private sector side, understanding how government works is a big piece of that puzzle in working in the private sector. So you would still benefit from doing an internship program in either the Senate or the Assembly.
Yeah, I will echo that. For those who don't know, the application deadline for this spring is October 7th is the internal Albany deadline for the full-time New York State Senate and Assembly internship. If you don't get a full-time one, or if you don't have the capability in your schedule to do that, there are part-time opportunities in the spring as well, where you can just do a part-time one and get internship credit that way, as he was alluding to. So that's another option. And I will also say a similar program, which I don't think any of you did, is especially if you're interested in federal or international, the Semester in Washington program is another similar opportunity that can give you that experience in DC for a semester with a full-time internship like that. So, all right, go ahead, Oswaldo. Oswaldo, we can't hear you if you're talking. Still can't hear you. I can see you now, but I can't hear you. Maybe you lost audio somehow. You can type it into the chat if you want to, Oswaldo, and we'll just read it. Other questions while he's doing that?
Other suggestions might be, people, employers and law schools are relying a lot on your web presence and your social media presence. So be sure to, I like to recommend that your LinkedIns be as squeaky clean as your resumes, and that your online presence is as clean as your resumes. I would recommend exploring different kinds of work environments, and thinking more broadly about what law is and what it could be for you. That I think a lot of people go to law school thinking that like law is the practice of like litigation and having clients and doing client representation, and that's just one piece. That law is very, very diverse, and the kind of work that lawyers do is very, very diverse. It's, everything from tax representation to agency work to regulation. So I think just being more creative about and open to what kind of career you're interested in the law, I think would be really helpful to most people going into law school. And make sure you actually want to be a lawyer. Don't go to law school if you don't actually want to be a lawyer.
So Oswaldo was going to ask, how would an MBA help going into the legal or field or government work? And I'll kind of add to that and say, if you want to talk about either an MBA or an MPA, maybe you want to share a little about the distinction between the two, and how that can help, or is that necessary, instead of, in addition to, alternatives, thoughts about any of those?
Yeah. Does anybody, I don't know, Will, do you have an MBA too? No. So the MBA is the business masters and MPA is public policy, and the two programs have a lot of overlap. They take many similar courses. The distinction with the business courses is it's heavier on financial management, but your public policy degree could be heavier in financial management if you're interested in like nonprofit work. There's almost no jobs I can think of where if you have a JD, you need a master's to get that job. But in my experience, having my master's has made me better at some of the analysis that I do in my day-to-day work, as far as research and data analytics and understanding, metrics, things of that nature. I think if you were interested in doing an MBA and JD, like you would be a stronger candidate for like our finance positions, but neither of those two degrees are required for a job in our finance office. So I think it kind of depends on the roles you're interested in and Here's what I would do. I would look at people who, I would go on LinkedIn and find people who have the job that you think is your dream job, and then track backwards what they did and what degrees they have. And they more likely than not don't have both. I think it makes you more competitive, but it's really not critical for like almost anything. That help? I don't know.
That's
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no, I would say I struggle with this question, because I took a lot of time working and then I figured, okay, well, I'm gonna go back to school. I'll go big or go home and just get a bunch of degrees. And I ended up sticking with the law degree, but I was between and public policy, public administration on one side, and then business administration, the MBA and the other. I'll start with the MBA, unless, one is, especially as a lawyer, lawyers are it's pretty good to have in the government. And so you should be okay if, whether it's federal or the state government, to even, and you could still end up in private sector, financial spaces, business spaces, with the law degree, or at a company. You can work for a company with a law degree and then work your way up through management and things like that. But I would say if you're looking like from the government standpoint, like from the federal government, unless it's like the Department of Commerce, SEC, or like an economic advisor in the White House, where that would provide extra value, it's probably not needed. And even so, some of those positions are filled, high positions or political positions that are filled without the MBA. But those would be kind of areas where it might be helpful to be more competitive, to have the MBA, to understand how the economy works and understand how private sector decisions are made. And on the public policy side, it comes up a lot, in my job, where, the secretary will have a question and say, how do I get from point A to point B? And, our job as lawyers in the department and, advising the general counsel, who's the advisor to the secretary, is to say, okay, this is how you can get there, but here are the risks, right? And here's what you have to keep in mind. But as part of that, we have to also factor in policy. We have to factor in, like, yes, the statute says this, or yes, the regulation says this, but are there ways to interpret? Is there decisions to be made that can fit within the confines of the discretion that a piece of legislation or a regulation has, or just sometimes purely political questions? And then is it the right judgment call given the authorities that the secretary has? That's when it is helpful to have a policy background. Now, if you did a bunch of experiences in state and local government, if you are caught up in the news, then that might come a little bit more naturally. But to make sound policy decisions, I would say, especially in the government space, having that public policy background would be helpful. But I will say, if you're going to go to traditional lawyer route, where you're going to work at an agency, or you're going to work as counsel with them for a state legislature, so on and so forth, you can stick in just the legal lane. But having that policy background helps out to support making broader decisions and providing value that way. But it's not needed, but it is helpful in that sense. I would say the MBA to a much lesser extent, unless you're really involved in those, commerce, economic advisor roles, which sometimes don't go filled by lawyers. Sometimes they just they'll have an MBA, and that's where that role will go.
Excellent. All right. We're almost out of time. Any last questions from anyone? Otherwise, maybe I'll have each of you just kind of wrap up with any last words of wisdom, final thoughts, things you wish you'd have known when you were sitting in their chair a few years ago.
Sorry.
Did someone start? I didn't hear anybody.
I was going to, but go ahead, Nick.
You go. No, you go.
No, I was just going to say, listen, law school, if you're not working a full-time job, is also an opportunity to be part of your community. And one way you can do that is by doing clinic. And I highly recommend you do clinic. It is your chance to get work experience. Aside from that, there's great power in yes. Say yes to opportunities. Try new things. Take risks every now and then, as long as they're calculated.
Nick, did you want to go?
Sure. Those are great. One thing I wish I knew was the gap in time between when you graduate law school and when you become a full attorney. Because if you are strapped financially, it can be a real struggle. So you graduate, if you're in New York, for example, you graduate in June or May, June, then you study for the bar for 2 months, and then you take it in July. You don't get your results until the end of October, so like Halloween weekend. And if you passed, you don't get sworn in until after January, sometimes the spring. So that's almost a year that you've finished law school, but you're not an attorney. A lot of people will find tentative jobs or firm jobs, but some people won't, because there are a lot of firms that won't hire you unless they're confident or sure or like really know that you've passed the bar and you will be able to practice in the very near future. So I think accounting for that period of time that you may be job searching, and if you're doing a bar class and not working, that is a period of time also where you just need to plan financially. And that is the thing I was not prepared for.
I'll say my time in Albany was an amazing one. And I actually, it's a story for another day, but the way I ended up in Albany was underneath different circumstances. And so, I ended up there. It wasn't where I thought I was going to be at the beginning of my senior year of high school, but I ended up being there, by the fall and starting. And it was the best decision ever. I wanted to stay closer to home, and Albany was a little bit further away, but I ended up going in. The reason being is, just the main one, which is you are in the epicenter of New York State, only second to New York City. And so the opportunities there, the diversity on campus, the student groups, whether you have access to the state legislature, there's a bunch of different types of consulting, lobbying, advocacy groups that surround the legislature that you can get experiences in. Take advantage of that when you're college, when you're out there, when you're up there for the semesters, because it is truly way more valuable, I would say, than and I will say this on the record, than probably most of the opportunities you could have on some of the more elite universities, because it's a little bit more constrained and the paths a little bit more, are a little bit more regimented. Now, there's obviously other benefits to that, but in terms of sheer exposure to the world and exposure to just kind of environments that you're going to be part of the rest of your life, business, public sector, capital, diverse groups, diverse clubs, that type of stuff has value later on in life. And it really has grounded my experiences throughout my career. And I carry that with me through law school, through my time at the law firm, and now with the administration. So really, this is a special moment in time. So take advantage of it. And then wherever you go, whether it's law school next, or whether it's some time after you graduate, and take that same approach in whatever job that you take. Here it's great because it's all around you, but wherever you go next, make sure you get those same experiences, because they deliver results later on in your career. So, but for the advice that sitting in your seats right now, I would say just enjoy it and get the most out of it, because it is a very unique combination that you're provided there of opportunity to kind of really see how the world works and get exposure to people who could make lasting impacts and partnerships and friendships for the rest of your career.
Well, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for sharing your email, Nick. I have a few things I want to share with everybody before everybody goes, but I do want to thank the three of you. We certainly appreciate your time and your always willingness to talk to students and to give back. We appreciate that.